Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is James Thigpen, and as IFDC's Global Corporate Communications Manager, I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar. Partnering for Resilient Transformation in Agribusiness for Rice and Potato Farmers will highlight the work of the Netherlands-funded REACH-Uganda project. And we hope that you'll have many takeaways as we discuss achievements, insights, and lessons learned from this project. Our webinar today will feature two sections. The first being a look at insights in the rice and potato sectors, presented by our rice and potato business innovation staff and our invited private sector partners from Chidozi Farmer Resource Center and Diners Group Limited. Secondly, we'll have a look at the overall impacts of the project presented by Chief Party David Hurst and Netherlands Embassy to Uganda First Secretary of Food and Nutrition Security, Hans Radschilders. As a matter of housekeeping, I encourage you to give your full attention to this webinar. A recording and resources will be made available for all participants, as well as for those who were not able to join us today. Finally, there will be two question and answer sessions. One will follow the potato and rice insight, and one will follow the presentation on impact. So please submit your questions via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and then we will be able to see those and pass them to our panelists. And please make sure that you put your comments in the comment section, because we will not be monitoring the comment section for questions. So please make sure that your questions get into the Q&A. And if they are addressed to a specific person, please feel free to go ahead and address that person, address that person in your question. So without further ado, I would like to invite Alexander Fernando, IFDC's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, to officially open this webinar. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for the introductions, James. And like you said, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to wherever you're based. I'm Alexander Fernando, a Regional Director for IFDC for East and Southern Africa and also Asia, based here in the neighboring country of Kenya, Nairobi. On behalf of IFDC, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome everyone to this closeout event for the REACH project, funded by the Netherlands Embassy in Uganda and implemented by IFDC. You'll shortly hear more about the REACH project, so I won't get into too much detail in my introductory comments. But I do want to say that we're extremely pleased with what the project has achieved through the last 5 years to support the growth of the potato and the rice sectors in Uganda. This builds on previous work that IFDC undertook through the Catalyst project, also funded by the Netherlands Embassy in Uganda. Building on the results of this previous project, REACH focused on developing agribusiness partnerships with private sector actors who believe in inclusive agricultural development. What does this mean? This means that our agribusiness partners are committed to sourcing from smallholder farmers. So that is typically farmers that are working on 1 to 2 acres, by either providing embedded services such as input supply and extension support, or also working with processors and aggregators who are committed to sourcing from smallholder farmers. And all of this is undertaken in a win-win manner. So this unique approach has really yielded some very impressive results. And just to name a few, the REACH project with its partners has scaled commercial seed production so that it now meets 8% of Uganda's seed potato needs. It's increased processing capacity and partnerships in both the processing, the potato and the rice sectors, increased productivity and incomes for smallholder farmers, and has also worked on enabling environment issues, for example, working with Narrow to expand the supply of seed potatoes, which has been a key industry bottleneck. So today you'll hear more about the project, not only from our staff, but also much more importantly from our agribusiness partners. These are the ones whose catalytic interventions have really transformed the sector and who will continue sourcing from smallholder farmers and servicing smallholder producers as consumers of inputs or buyers of produce long after the project has ended. I'd like to conclude by thanking several entities and individuals. First, the Ugandan government, represented by the Ministry of Agriculture animal industry and fisheries for hosting the project and being a strong collaborator. Of course, thank you to all of the project partners and stakeholders, particularly the agribusiness partners with whom the project has worked with to make this project a success and also transform the lives of smallholder farmers. Thanks very much to our project partner, Cardno, for their excellent technical collaboration, particularly in market systems development. And finally, a big thank you to the government of the Netherlands for their commitment to Uganda's development objectives and entrusting this with IFDC. Behind every successful project, there is a lot of hard work by many teams and individuals. I would like to start by thanking David Slane for his 9 years of excellent service to IFDC and excellent leadership of both the Catalyst and REACH teams these past years as program manager. Also, a big thank you to David Hurst, who has served as Deputy Program Manager on both Catalyst and REACH, and who is now IFDC's country representative in Uganda for our ongoing activities in the country. Lastly, my sincere thanks to the entire REACH team for your excellent work and contributions over the last 5 years. IFDC looks forward to continuing our work in Uganda with our partners and stakeholders to advance food security and agribusiness development. Thank you very much. And with those opening remarks, back to you, James.
Thank you, Alexander, for those comments. I would now like to pass the mic over to David Hurst, who will be giving an overview of the project.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Alexander. Good afternoon to everyone from Uganda. My name is David Hurst. I'm the Chief of Party of the REACH-Uganda project. Today, I'll be presenting the achievements and lessons learned from REACH. I'll be presenting with two of my colleagues, Rogers Basarima and Rosette Kemagishna. So in terms of the structure of this presentation, there are really two parts, as James said. Firstly, I'll be giving an overview of the REACH project. Then we'll talk about the sector challenges that we identified at the beginning of the project and how these have been addressed. And then in the second part, after the first Q&A session, we'll look at what the impact and lessons learned are from the REACH project. So what was the REACH project? In the end, it was almost a 5-year project, ended officially in August 2021. The total project budget was 19.6 million euros. This was to be inclusive of 6 million euros cost share from the private sector. And we were targeting 40,000 farmers. And this was to be done through at least 25 private sector partnerships. And essentially, we're looking at two main value chains, potato and rice, but also the ancillary or support crops for those two main crops, which I'll talk about a bit later. We were working in 3 regions in Uganda. In eastern Uganda, we were working in the Kyoga Plains for rice production, and also the Elgon Highlands for potato production. In southwest Uganda, we work in the Kigezi Highlands, again for potato production. And in 2018, the project expanded into the Rwenzori region, working with 3 commercial seed multipliers of Dutch seed potato. As Alexander said, we had one technical partner on this project, which was Cardno Emerging Markets, which provided technical support in the area of market systems development, but we also work closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and NARO. So what was the goal of the project? To strengthen the efficiency and inclusiveness of the agricultural market system, while contributing to improved household resilience and productivity in the rice and potato sectors in Uganda. This was split into 2 objectives. The first objective is what we call the market activities. So under this objective, agribusinesses, service providers and farmers were to benefit from better market systems functions. And then in the second objective, this is what we termed the pre-market or the farmer uplift activities, where enhanced resilience and productivity of market-oriented farmers in the commodity value chains was to be achieved. So what were the critical issues to be addressed? At the beginning of the project, we did market assessments for both crops, for potato and rice. We then developed intervention strategies for both crops that looked at the key opportunities within those sectors, but also the key challenges or bottlenecks. So in potato, we realized at the beginning of the project, there was a gap in the supply of the seed potato value chain. At the beginning of the project, only 1.5% of national demand for seed potato was being met. Seed is the most critical factor in improving productivity and yield of potato. So that was one of the main pillars we were going to focus on, to establish and strengthen this local seed potato industry. Secondly, we also established there was a niche market in the potato processing sector, which currently is about 10% in Uganda. But this market wasn't being served by the right varieties that were suitable for processing, and also the quality of these varieties, potato varieties, and also the consistency of supply wasn't there. So the second area was trying to establish and strengthen this supply chain for the processing industry. And thirdly, we looked at how to improve access and information about application of crop protection measures and fertilizer. Again, two critical components of improving yields in potato. In the rice sector, we established in support of the government policy to improve domestic lowland rice cultivation, that there would need to be an expansion of land suitable for irrigation. So that's one area we looked into, is how there could be an increase in availability of irrigated land. Secondly, at the beginning of the project, we realized the majority of farmers were using, in terms of their milling services for rice, they were using single-stage mills. These single-stage mills offered low prices only for farmers. They also have very low recovery rates. So in the end, a farmer suffers in terms of their net income when they're accessing a single-stage mill. So we, in this component, we tried to improve, or we looked to increase the use of more efficient milling services by farmers. The third area we looked at was more of an intensification approach. There was still a need to improve intensification of rice. This we felt could be done through access to better quality seed, similar to potato, but also improved good agronomic practices. At the same time, within the market systems of both crops of rice and potato, there are cross-cutting themes that influence the how that market system operates. So what we looked at here, one was infrastructure. How could we bring in some catalytic investments in infrastructure that would really improve access to input and output markets for farmers? The second area, we realized the key to unlocking issues of cost of production for both rice and potato farmers was having access to finance, affordable finance. And the third area we identified was the business enabling environment. So how could the business enabling environment, particularly the policy level, be more conducive to development of the rice and potato sectors for smallholder farmers. So those were the challenges we identified. What were the main approaches that we used as a project? And there were three approaches. As I said at the beginning, this was a two-part project, or two components in the design. There was a market systems component. So under this component, we worked with 26 private sector partners. We're going to meet two of those today. And these 26 partnerships leveraged a total investment of 5.4 million euros. And this was, the project put in 1.4 million euros. So the ratio of investment was 1 by the project to 3 to the private sector. And these were in a number of different areas and across a number of different sort of business models as well. So we looked at startup businesses, particularly in the seed potato sector, where there weren't that many players already in the industry. We looked at more established players, such as Diners Rice, who we're going to meet today, who wanted to expand their business in terms of improving their sourcing from smallholder farmers. And we also worked with bigger companies who wanted to diversify, such as, for example, Kabimba Rice is a big rice processing at a global company, but they wanted to diversify into the rice seed sector. So there was a range of partners that we worked with, and some were startup models, some were more established, and some centered around the introduction of new technology and innovation. In total, through these partnerships, the 26 private sector partnerships, we reached a total of almost 10,000 farmers. At the same time, we identified at the beginning of the project, there was a need for a farmer uplift or pre-market component. So the project was involved directly or through partners in the training of farmers in areas such as good agronomic practices, farming as a business, and climate smart agriculture. So in total, the project trained 36,000 farmers. 62% of these were female in these specific areas. This was done through local partners, where we did develop capacity of local partners to do this, and it was also done through private extension workers as well. We also, in recognition of the challenge in the financial access that we identified before, we trained 23,000 farmers in financial literacy. We couldn't quite reach the target of 36,000 in financial literacy due to the effect of COVID and the restrictions in movement from lockdowns that were enforced in Uganda. The third sort of pillar or approach was in terms of infrastructure, in partnership with district local governments. And there were 5 district local governments in Quen, Bulambuli, Butaleja, Rubanda, and Kanungu. We upgraded 67 kilometers of rural feeder roads. This was done in partnership. The district local governments also invested their resources and some of the equipment into these partnerships. At this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Rogers Basarima, who's going to take us through the key sector changes that have taken place in potato.
Thank you so much, David, for that presentation. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rogers Basarima. I work with the REACH project as a business innovation specialist. I'll be taking you through the key sector challenges that has been observed in the potato sector after the 5 years of implementation of the project in Uganda. These key sector changes are related to the first three challenges that David mentioned. I'll be going through one by one. The first challenge was related to strengthening and establishing a local seed potato industry that can serve and reach the demand of seed potato. Under the local seed potato system, we have observed private sector commercial seed potato supply chain has been established. Under this arrangement, 8 integrated seed businesses have been established. 3 are in the Elgon Islands and 5 are in the southwestern Uganda Islands. Those are the Chikezi areas. Through these 8 integrated seed potato businesses, they have managed to provide over 1,360 metric tons of seed. That is approximately 9% of the national demand, reaching over 1,700 farmers. And it is projected to increase to over 3,600 metric tons by the end of 2022, reaching over 3,600 farmers. That will be approximately 22% of national demand compared to the baseline of 1.5%. So we are seeing more and more of clean seed being put on the market by these 80 integrated seed businesses. Also, what we have observed that the average yield of quality declared seed has increased to 4.35 metric tons versus the 3.1 metric tons. This is attributed to use of clean quality seed as the use of home-saved seed. We've also witnessed after the establishment of the 8 integrated seed businesses in all the region, we have observed that the tissue culture supply is still a bottleneck, and only 48% of the demand can be met by the existing supply. But what we're also noting is that the private sector is starting to pick interest in the supply of this tissue culture material, and we are optimistic the investments are being made to make sure that the demand for the tissue culture material that is used in the greenhouse to produce clean foundation seed is met. So in that area, we have also observed the new technologies coming in order to bridge the gap of that demand gap of 52. These integrated seed businesses are working in partnership with other implementing partners in this sector, that is SIP, has worked out with these partners to come up with the innovative technology of propagating the tissue culture material to make sure that they operate their greenhouses at full capacity. So the other challenge which was pointed out by David was the emerging processing industry, that market niche of 10%. Under that arrangement, what we've observed by 2021, over 1,350 metric tons of industry demanded potatoes have been supplied. But we've also observed there remain a gap. When you look at the current demand, which is 5,350 metric tons for crisps processing, there is still that gap versus what is being supplied. 1,300 metric tons versus 5,350 metric tons. We've also noted that the demand for processing varieties is likely to increase to 16,000 metric tons in 2020 and going forward in 2023 and others to come. There are investors who have picked interest in the emerging processing industry for potato, and because of that, we anticipate that this demand is likely to increase from the existing 5,000 to around 16,000 metric tons. So also what we have also noted that the high yielding seed is entering the market, over 360 metric tons of the seed processing varieties. The seed processing varieties we are talking about Panamera and Taurus from HZPC. These are Dutch companies. And then we have Marquise from Agrico. And we are anticipating that depending on what they are harvesting now and what has been harvested, these potatoes will be able to reach 450 farmers. And the other point that David mentioned out was about access to crop protection, products and fertilizer. We've noted that the fertilizer usage among farmers has improved from 80 to 95%. And then also, we are also noting improved access to crop protection products as a result of increased number of stockists that are into the close proximity of where these production activities take place. We've also observed the promotional activities taking place by mainly these stockists trying to promote their products among the farmers, and also through training, which are conducted by the CIPRE service provider, a model that came in to help the farmers working with these CIPRE service providers to make sure that the right chemical is applied at the right time and in the right way. And at this time, I would like to introduce one of REACH project partner, Kigezi Farmers Resource Center, who are basically involved in seed potato production. Before me here is their representative, Frank Kakuru. Thank you so much, Frank, for honoring to come here to share your experience and insight about the Kigezi Farm Resource Center and the entire seed potato industry. You're welcome, Mr. Frank. Please, can you introduce yourself and tell us about Kigezi Farm Resource Center?
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm called Kakuru Frank. I'm a member of Kigezi Farmers Resource Center and a director at the same time. Kigezi Farmers Resource Center is a potato growing company which was started as a sole proprietorship by our mother, Mrs. Fidelis Kalgava. When she started farming, she was growing Irish potato for wear and a little excess for sale to support the family and take her kids to take us to school. Before she transitioned to seed potato production.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank, for that introduction about Kigezi Farmers Resource Center. So our viewers and listeners would want to understand what made KFRC transition from production of wire potato and you enter into the seed potato business.
Mr. Rogers, you know, it's a common practice in Uganda to recycle seed from the previous season to the coming season as seed. And this creates a cycle of very poor quality seed which in turn leads to very poor yield, poor production of the seed from the garden. So this was a very big challenge, and which was hampering us going forward. So we needed a source of very clean seed, which we had to see how to address it. So this is when we are able to partner with IFDC under the REACH project in 2016, start producing quality seed.
How has the partnership between REACH and the Uganda Farmers Resource Center helped you solve the challenge you mentioned, the challenge of quality clean seed?
When we partnered with IFDC under the REACH project in 2016, they took us under and they trained us in comprehensive and practical farming methods in Irish potato production and multiplication. They trained us specifically in all stages of Irish potato production, from min tubers to from plantlets to min tubers, from min tubers to basic seed. And at the end of the training, we partnered with IFDC and we cost shared, and we were able to put up 2 screenhouses and to enable us produce quality seed. Then the training also involved farming as a business. We also trained in good agronomical practices and post-harvesting handling. So, and when we are done with post-harvesting handling, they realized there was need for a store, and we also cost shared with IFDC again to put up a light diffuse store, which has a capacity of close to 60,000 metric tons. No, 60,000 metric tons, not 60,000 metric tons of Irish potato seed.
Thank you so much, Frank, for that detailed explanation of how the partnership has helped. We would also want to understand what has been the impact since you started the production of seed in 2016 up to date in 2020. What is the impact of your seed potato business on the farming community in the area where you do production of this seed and the entire country, Uganda, and maybe you started?
The REACH project of IFDC has enabled us to make numerous connections. For example, we've had different talk shows on different radios across the country. We've attended different agricultural trade shows and fairs. And through these radio talk shows, we are able to sensitize the community about availability of seed. And the community is also aware. They have been able to witness firsthand information or firsthand practical information on how use of clean seed can increase productivity. And through the connections also, we are able to sell our seed to different parts of the country. We've sold seed to areas of Eastern Uganda. We've sold to West Nile, and some international corporations have approached us for seed. For example, we've sold to different companies in Rwanda. We've sold to Eastern Congo. And the government at the same time also approached us and they wanted seed. And currently we are supplying more than 30,000 metric tons of seed to the government under the NATS program.
Thank you so much, Frank, for that insightful of how the impact. Maybe our listeners and the viewers also want to understand, like in a year, what is the quantity of seed you can produce?
Currently, as a company, we are producing in excess of 100 tons a season. This is where I pointed out of the 100 tons, more than 30,000 is being consumed by the government. And the local community takes, actually, I'm happy to inform you that the local community takes much of the remaining 70%.
So thank you so much. Now, in terms of when you look at the side of the farmer, what has happened to the yield? Have you had some feedback from the farmer concerning the yield?
Yeah. When we started growing Irish potato and supplying it to different parts of the country, we got some feedback from different farmers and from different parts of the country. These are our customers we made through the different talk shows we had, and they are giving us feedback about the improved yield, which is attributed to use of quality seed. And most of them, like in our local community, personally, the people around us, they are able now to purchase seed, quality seed from us, meaning their livelihood their incomes have improved. Because before they were unable, they used to recycle seed, they couldn't afford seed from certified seed potato producers. So now they can purchase seed directly from us because their incomes have generally increased because of the increased production, which is being realized by the use of clean seed, use of fertilizers.
Thank you so much. Would also want to understand what are some of the lessons you've learned in this business of seed potato. But people out there would also want to know.
Rogers, we've learned a couple of lessons over the years. For example, we've realized the use of fertilizer. When you plant your Irish potato with fertilizer, the yield is going to increase by more than 50%. Then we've also, not forgetting use of quality seed. Over the years, from our records, it's very clear use of clean seed together with the fertilizers, we're able to increase our yield before we partnered with IFDC. We've been able to increase our overall yield by more than 50% compared to what we are producing before. For example, before we started all this partnership, it was a common practice, it was a common occurrence to plant 10 bags of Irish potato and you harvest at most 12. 10, you're getting 12. So, but now, if you are planting 10, you are short of getting 80. So there's a very, very big increase in the productivity.
Thank you so much. Can you please share with us how the future for KFRC will be for Kigezi Farmers Resource Center?
The future for Kigezi Farmers Resource Center is a great one. We are looking at increasing production capacity for the screenhouses. That would include putting up bigger and more standardized screenhouses to increase our production. And we've also learned that propagating plantlets into apical cuttings actually increases production, and in the process of increasing our production of plantlets and incubers, we are cutting our costs by more than 30%. So we've learned that if you go ahead with propagating, we are actually doubling our production while reducing the cost at the same time.
Thanks so much for those insightful and sharing your experience about the potato sector and Kigezi Farmers Resource Center specifically. And now I would like to hand over to the moderator, James. Over to you. Thank you so much, our listeners.
Thank you so much, Rogers, and thank you, Frank. I would like to remind everyone to submit your questions for the Q&A at the bottom of your toolbar. You'll see Q&A. If you have questions, please put them there to help us sort through them rather than in the chat box. So please use the Q&A. And now, Rosette Kimigisha, a REACH Business Innovation Specialist, will now discuss insight from the rice sector in Uganda and we'll be joined by Mohammed Sekatawa, who's the Managing Director of Diners Group Limited. Over to you, Rosette.
Thank you, James. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear listeners. I'm Rosette Kemigisha, as James has introduced to me. I work for IFDC REACH-Uganda as Business Innovation Specialist. I'm going to take you through the key sector changes in the rice value chain, addressing the critical issues that previously had been talked about by David Hurst. Through partnerships with 5 rice processors, including Roba Holdings, Kibimba Limited, Diners Group Limited, SWT Tanners, and St. Richard's Group of Companies, about 6,654 farmers supplied their rice and milled their rice to multi-stage mills in 2021. Farmers have been seen getting more premium price of about 19% and net income of 29%. And we actually anticipate that these farmers will continuously to increase to about 10,000 by 2022. And all this is being accrued by the high turnover from all presented by multi-stage mills. And of course, also farmers continuously will continue to supply their rice to these multi-stage mills because of the additional incomes, additional price of different products, including bran and broken rice. Furthermore, there has been expansion on gazetted land area for productive rice cultivation. This has been registered by SWT Tanners in Bulambuli district, and about 5,000 acreage of land was acquired and established. Out of that, 500 acres were opened and cultivated, and of course, rice was harvested to a high, really, production. More so, regarding seed, rice seed, we engaged 2 different partners, Kibimba Limited and Pow Seed, and we have realized about 13 metric tons of seed, reaching 1,173 farmers, and the yield has increased due to quality good seed, certified seed produced by Pow Seed, to about 29 farmers, much higher than the seed that is used by commonly farmers who use home saved seed. And in this, there has been reduced pressure on, of course, gazetted wetland by the government, by the farmers in rice cultivating areas and communities. At this moment, I want to invite one of our rice partners, rice miller and rice purchaser or trader in the Elgon region, Mbale, Kapchora, and other areas that he sources paddy from, Mr. Mohammed Sekatawa, representing Diners Group Limited. Mr. Mohammed, you're most welcome to this webinar conference. You can talk about yourself, talk about and introduce the company at large.
Thank you, Rosette. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Sekatawa. I work for Diners Group Limited as the Managing Director. Diners Group Limited started in 2013 as an intermediary rice trader and evolved into a rice processor. Diners Group focuses on rice processing and marketing. We do process both aromatic and non-aromatic rice varieties sourced from smallholder farmers spread across Eastern Uganda from the districts of Mbale, Tororo, Butareja, Budaka, and Kwen. The company is positioned in Mbale as its core marketing center and business hub.
Thank you, Mohammed. We would love to understand what are those identified issues that you came across so that you would really have this partnership with IFDC?
Diners Group had 5 areas which were constrained its business and performance and growth. One, we source from smallholder farmers who majorly were milling their rice with single stage mills at the village level. They were incurring high transportation costs to our rice mill, so they were not bringing paddy to us. We also were incurring high cost of sourcing and mobilizing paddy due to scattered production. Also, we were receiving raw volumes of poor quality of paddy to the mill and had unclear marketing strategy and poor branding.
And what are those interventions that you embraced as DGL to address those critical issues?
In partnership with IFDC REACH project, we cost shared in areas of procuring a truck so that we could lower the cost of transportation of paddy from the smallholder farmers and also transport milled rice to markets. We also procured motorcycles to support extension and movement of our field officers. The company rebranded and also designed a new packaging material to become attractive and competitive on the market. We also invested in post-harvest handling materials like taplins to support good post-harvest handling practices.
Thank you. And share with us some of the impact registered at both farm level and at DGL level.
With the intervention is mentioned earlier on, the smallholder farmers have been the major beneficiaries. One, they have been able to lower the cost of transportation by 40% from where rice is produced to our milling facility. Also, when the paddy comes into our milling facility, it is handled in a critical way that they are able to recover about 65% of head rice, 3% of broken rice, and 12% of rice bran. All these products at Diners Group Limited, we pay the farmer, translating into additional 700 million Ghana shillings into the pockets of the farmer. Another way is with the rebranding, the company has been able to realize more attractiveness from the customers, that our turnover has increased to 3 billion shillings per annum. 70% of our turnover is paid to the farmers. We are putting in more money into the pockets of the farmer. We have been, with the growth, we have been able to create more permanent jobs at the milling factory, where we have 8 additional jobs created, and also 15 new jobs for village agents who support our aggregation activities in the rice production areas. We have been able to source 2,000 metric tons of paddy rice, meaning that our capacity increased from 15% to 45% to date.
Thank you. And what are those lessons learned that you would love to share with us during this implementation process with IFDC REACH project?
Lesson number 1 is about access to finance for smallholder farmers. Diners, the Microfinance Support Center, and the smallholder farmers had a tripartite relationship where Diners Group was a anchor between these two parties to guarantee access to finance for the smallholder farmers. With this, we guaranteed about 200 farmers, and cumulatively 700 million has been accessed by chain actors as credit at 8% per annum. With these relationships, we are bridging the gap between the smallholder farmer, the lender, and the miller, so that money transitions into the entire value chain. Another lesson learned is that rice production is still labor intensive. Farmers are still using different ways of planting, weeding, harvesting, and also drying the rice. Another one is about integration of ICT into the value chain. It is critical for ICT for businesses to survive and become more competitive. COVID-19 has exposed our businesses so much, and that's a very, very big lesson.
Could you also share with the listeners the future plans probably you really have for DGL or Diners Group Limited?
With the evolving competition, Diners Group plans to diversify its product range. Besides selling milled rice grains, we want to add value to the byproducts and also more products from the rice so that we can have more revenue streams and create more impact in terms of revenue and employment creation for the population and also building the nation through payment of taxes. With the volumes increasing, currently the company has storage capacity of 200 metric tons. We want to set up a 1,000 metric tons warehouse and equip it with mechanical drying equipment and a quality control laboratory to enhance the quality of milled rice and also educate farmers on how to handle rice in the farms. Another future plan is the expanding on our market so that we can grow from strength to strength. Currently, we are operating through 3 sales outlets, 2 based in Mbale and 1 in Kampala. We want to add 2 more in 2022, starting with Malaba. We capture the Kenyan market because we have customers from that side, and also Entebbe to penetrate more across the central region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed, for sharing this. Sharing with us the insights on the rice value chain, especially the wider sector, and also for DGL. At this moment, I want to hand over to David first to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosette, and thank you very much from our 2 partners there. I want to briefly conclude this session by talking about the 3 main cross-cutting changes that have taken place in the rice and potato sectors. So in terms of infrastructure, we said 67 kilometers of roads have been upgraded or constructed in partnership with the district local government. These investments have now reached a total of 156,000 community members in the 5 districts that we talked about. The real benefit of this is that because of the improved roads, it leads to a 50% reduction in transport costs. And also for farmers, in terms of sales prices, it leads to a 40% increase in sales price, either because a buyer can come to the farmer or a farmer can access market in some of these areas. Some of the roads were in mountainous areas and could take 1 or 2 days to reach markets. Secondly, in the area of accessible finance, 31% of farmers on average have received loans annually. The baseline was 16%. And now we see a situation where 55% of farmers have bank accounts. This could be attributed to the training on financial literacy, but also and the linkages that have been done with financial institutions through those training programs. The VSLA component in the financial literacy, and also partnerships with financial institutions such as Microfinance Support Center. The funds, in terms of loans, the funds that are provided for these loans have been used for productive agriculture, such as essentially the hire of land and also the purchase of agricultural inputs for the coming season. And then the third area we mentioned at the beginning was the business enabling environment. Through the project, IFDC has supported MIFE to improve the seed inspection and certification system. This has involved training of local seed inspectors at the district level, but also the licensing of 4 commercial companies doing commercial seed production, 3 in the Ruwenzori area and 1 in central region. At the same time, the project has also supported the efforts of MIFE and NARRO in national performance variety trials for new varieties that potentially could come into Uganda. In rice, the situation has been a bit different. The project has tended to support data requests from the different national rice platforms. There are 3 different national rice platforms, and they have different interests and are different lobby groups. So the project felt best that the best way we could support them, because they're already very strong in their lobby, was with data requests. So we provide them with information on yields, on cost of production, and things like that. At this point, I'd like to hand you back to James so we can go into the first question and answer session.
Thanks so much, David. And getting our views switched around here. Thanks so much. We've had a lot of questions coming in. And so, David, I'll field this first one to you. Tell me a little bit about the fertilizer use baseline. There's a question, especially on the potatoes, that the fertilizer use was 80% the baseline, or did the usage increase by 80%?
The baseline was 80%. Fertilizer usage at the beginning of the project was already quite high. But we've seen an increase from 80% to 95%. Probably the other observation is, at the moment, the application rate of that fertilizer, the vast majority of farmers are using, potato farmers are using the correct fertilizer, but the application rate is around, the correct application rate, therefore the usage, is about 45%. So there has been an improvement in the actual usage, but the application rate still isn't there.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. And a similar kind of question. Well, we're getting a lot of questions about the gender concerns related to the project. What insights has the project gained in relation to challenges, especially that women have, whether it's uptaking new technologies or linkages? Because our trainings did reach 62% women. So what kind of challenges did we face, and how did we overcome those?
Yeah, I'll be talking a bit more about that in the impact session, but just for now, as he said, 62% of the farmers trained were women. The project identified one area of resilience in terms of gender, which was joint decision-making in the household. And this, besides training on gender dynamics, there was an approach used called the community change agent approach. And through that, we have seen changes at the household level in terms of joint decision-making around production and budgeting for that production. That's sort of at the household level, but there are also challenges in business as well. And we recognize, the opportunities for women in business are sometimes limited. This project has worked with 2 women-supported businesses in the potato sector. So they one is a crisp processor and one is a local seed business. So there's some of the opportunities were provided, and within the partnership design, there were 26 partnerships in this project. Within the partnership design, we made sure there was a strong gender lens. So where possible, employment opportunities were sought for women. And at the same time, we wanted to partner with companies that would also give opportunities for women in terms of, well, an example would be in the rice sector, in post-harvest handling and drying at one of the milling facilities. So those are the sorts of things we were looking for when we designed each of the partnerships.
Great. And this may also be covered in impact, so feel free to bump it to later. A question on the financial literacy training. What are the outcome and tangible benefits of this?
I think what we've seen, there is an improvement in uptake of loans. So the financial literacy goes into aspects such as financial linkages. It looks at different financial products that are available to farmers. And it also actually brought different financial institutions, it brought farmers and different financial institutions closer together so farmers could learn about those different financial products. So there has been an impact from that training in terms of providing opportunities for farmers to know about different financial packages that would be available to them. At the same time, VSLA does, the project also supported VSLA. That is a strong component bringing group cohesion, but also lends to farmers at a, let's say at a micro level, because loan sizes would be less than 100 euros. But it's an important social safety net, covering household expenses, covering medical needs and stuff like that. So I think through those training, you could see through those training and linkages that have happened, some of that can be attributed to, or some of that has impacted on that improvement in terms of loans. I think my colleague, Rosette wants to add on there.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you, David. In addition to what David has talked about, one of the impact that is registered by the project in the financial literacy training is the management and bookkeeping wholesome of the sum that the providence loan or VSLs farmers are holding. So you realize that farmers are efficiently using the loan facility to that specific use that is meant to be, instead of getting a loan. A farmer group gets a loan and it is just distributed across, and it is either spent on different issues altogether that has not been planned for. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Getting some questions here about the sustainability of the Dutch potato market. How did the project prepare the market to sustainably provide this variety, as this is what the processing sector is now wanting to use?
Yeah, as we establish in the processing sector is still a niche market. It's about 10% of the total potato sector in value. With the Dutch seed, this aspect of the project really started in 2018, and it was necessary to identify commercial entities that could basically multiply Dutch seed. The reason we looked at commercial players is it needs a significant amount of resources. The cost of importation of seed, bringing the seed in, of course, is expensive. It needs cold storage due to the long dormancy period of these varieties. So there is some, and mechanization as well. So there are some important investments that need to be made in that sector. But where we started really was with a company in central region in Uganda, in the Macroland. They already had interest in the sector, and they were already promoting some of these varieties to some extent before the project came in. At the same time, we also worked on the other side with the processing sector as well to identify what their needs were in terms of the different varieties. The Taurus variety is heavily demanded in the market. It's very suitable for processing of crisps. And the second one was Marquise. So with those companies, we were able to test these potatoes as for their suitability for the processing sector. So basically through these investments, there is, as my colleague Roger's talked about, there is some seed is now reaching the market, and this will provide opportunities also for smallholders who can buy this seed and can also access this processing market. So what we see is that this process has all started, and it's started, it's emerging, and this can really take off in the future. And it has attracted, as my colleague said, new investors into the sector as well. So it's becoming a growing market. However, there are challenges with the Dutch potato, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation.
Thanks so much. A lot of questions here about the rice chain, and one specific question from an IFDC board member is there any will any efforts to limit the use of wetlands for farming negatively affect the resilience and the sustainability of the market linkages that have been created in this project?
Yeah, I think I mean through the project we've tried to adopt a do no harm approach. There are sort of three types of wetlands. There's protected wetlands that cannot be used for any purposes, agricultural purposes. There are partial wetlands, and then there are wetlands that are actually designated to be used for rice production. So we did through this project adopt what we call a wetlands wise use, and we were cognizant of the fact that any kind of expansion could go, from designated areas into some of these what we call partial wetlands. So any expansion, we talked about the irrigation system that's been established, the irrigation farm that's been established by one of our partners, SWT. That's on already gazetted land. So it's government permission to use that land for irrigation of rice. So that's really what we've encouraged. But at the same time, we are saying intensification is necessary, and that goes back to issues of access to good quality seed, and also proper water management by smallholder farmers and other good agronomic practices. So the approach has been very much an intensification one, while one that also recognized that the the domestic production of rice in Uganda, which was really promoted, domestic self-sufficiency in rice was really being promoted by the government of Uganda. That was followed strongly by the project.
And a related question really about this, because we were talking kind of about climate and that cross-cutting theme. What about soil fertility within rice production? As we've seen these good agronomic practices being taken up and things like that, how have we seen the effects of soil fertility?
Maybe I'll ask my colleague, Rosette, do you want to? How is soil fertility? How do you see the soil fertility situation in rice production? And how is fertilizer usage affecting it?
Okay, with rice production, you don't do production for 2 seasons without fertilizer application. And fertilizer alone is not the prerequisite for you to increase productivity in rice cultivation. It's a combination of so many aspects. 1, management. 2, the soil type. 3, of course, soil type versus fertilizer. Then the other aspect regards with the seed and generally the management of the whole cultivable area. So if you consider only a soil, you do not really get the better or accrued output for market. So the constant cultivation on that kind of piece of land or kind of piece of plot drastically reduces fertility of that soil, of that specific area. So you have to continuously, either you rest the land for a period of time, a season or so, or you continuously apply fertilizer, use better quality seed, and also, of course, practice good agronomic practices.
Let me add something to your statement. It's Mohammed Sekatawa again from Diners Group. In addition to what Rosette has just shared with us, in our extension activities, before we tell a farmer to use fertilizer, we need to do soil sampling to ascertain which nutrients are lacking in the soil before you go ahead to apply. So when you have the analysis, you use the particular blend which is suitable for that particular to maintain the fertility and also reduce on the acidity of the soils. Thank you.
Great, thank you for those comments. And we'll now move on. David will continue speaking on, I think, what has been kind of a lot of burning questions right now. What are the impacts on resilience and lessons learned in the project? So David, I will spotlight you and let you take it away.
Thanks, James. So what has been the impact of the REACH project? We'll break this down into farmer level and also business level or firm level. At farmer level, what we've seen is that yields have improved significantly, 35% in the potato sector, 126% in the rice sector baseline versus end line. Some of this can be attributed to improved seed availability, and some of it can be attributed to improvement in adoption of good agronomic practices. I would say also that in terms of the yield, we looked here at a baseline and end line. The average yield for potato was 4.19 metric tons per acre over the 5 years of the project. So it's very similar to the end line of 4.15 metric tons per acre. In rice, the end line was 1.36 metric tons an acre. However, the average year on year was 1.10 metric tons per acre. So there are, differences in terms of response to weather and climatic issues. You can see in the trends in potato, when there was very heavy rains, such as 2019, potato yields did drop. And something a bit similar with the rice sector as well, in terms of drier periods in the agricultural season. So there is a bit of a fluctuation, but the overall trend has been very impressive. So in line with this, also there's been a significant increase in net income in potato at baseline level, about 380 euros per acre per season. This is almost doubled to just under 700 euros per acre per season. The assumption there is that 100% of the actual yield is sold. The same with rice. There's been a significant increase in net income related to rice production from 180 euros at baseline to just over 300 per acre per season at or by the end of the project. So in line with this, yield improvements and improvements in net income, food security has also improved. It's been a gradual improvement from 55% at baseline to 62% by the end of the project. This we could attribute to some extent to the improvement in yields and of course income, but also the factor of crop diversification, which allows farmers to fall back on other crops in the event of a reduced or poor harvest in rice or potato. So at the business level, we were working with 26 private sector partners, and cumulatively from these partnership interventions, the total turnover, additional turnover from these interventions only has been 4.7 million euros, and it's been rising 40% on a 40% basis annually. So from this, we can conclude, or what we can see is that these companies, the sales of these companies are improving, which is a sign of sustainability, despite difficult economic periods, particularly in 2020 and the effects of COVID. So through this increased turnover and these partnerships, a total of just over 340 full-time equivalent jobs have been created. This gives an additional income through these jobs of 190,000 euros. So also, what has been the impact on resilience? This project is about resilience at household level. The project, in the project design, we define resilience as the ability of people and systems to resist, absorb, and transform in response to shocks and setbacks. And through this, we identified at the beginning of the project 4 key areas that we felt the project could impact on. These were climate smart agriculture, income diversification, household access to finance, and joint decision making, or gender dynamics. So in terms of income diversification, by the end of the project, 97% of trained farmers are purposely diversifying their crops. This is in comparison to non-trained farmers. We looked at the end line of the project, and 77% of non-trained farmers are diversifying. So there is an effect of the training in terms of the practice of diversification, but it's also about why they diversify. That's probably important. yes, they diversify to improve food security, but also they diversify, or they rotate their crops to improve the quality of soils. And the crop diversification approach provides a backup source of income in case of failure of their main crop, which would be rice and potato. Access to finance was a second key component within the resilience design. Training, as a result of the training on financial literacy, we've seen improved planning and budgeting for farm activities. The project focused very much on a VSLA approach, and we've seen this really does cultivate a savings culture at the group level. It keeps the group together, and these savings, the practice of savings is really important in farmer taking the next step in terms of access to finance, which might then be to a financial institution. But VSLA is limited for investment. It only provides small loans. So in terms of the sort of ability to absorb or shock or setback, we can see that, you know, because COVID-19 came in the last 2 years of the project, those farmers that were able to establish a savings account from a financial institution really use that as a fallback position in times of crisis. So it's not so much they're using their VSLA, which provides limited finance. They have to fall back on something that will provide more, a bigger loan to them, usually about 350 euros, to cover their cost of production in case of a significant effect, such as the economic downturn that happened due to COVID-19. So the third component of resilience was about improving with training on climate smart agriculture, but the adoption of climate smart agricultural practices. This did improve as a result of the training and technical support provided by the project. However, we do see, you know, quite a difference between the two sectors with the rice and the potato. Rice farmers were a bit more proactive in adopting these climate smart agricultural practices. So in the occurrence of a dry spell, they would use water conservation techniques. They would construct bunds, so they would be able to retain water for the agricultural season. So they're proactive. Whereas potato farmers, we can see where there was a climatic event, such as 2019, there was high level, there was very heavy rain in Uganda, very above normal rain, and farmers, potato farmers' yields did suffer a bit in terms of late blight. So they didn't really have a good coping mechanism, apart from the use of crop protection measures, but they didn't have a good preventative coping mechanism in the potato growing areas. Fourth area, joint household decision making. We can see it's improved from 45% at the baseline to a level of 58%. We talked earlier about the different approaches, and the project did use a change agent approach. We've seen that joint decision making on planning and budgeting for farming households has increased to support their agricultural production. So this is good in preparation for if a shock or setback does occur. So what are the main lessons learned and recommendations from the REACH project? I'll start at a general level. Firstly, we can see potato and rice are relevant crops both for food security, for improving farmer resilience, and also business expansion. In Uganda, we can see food security has gradually improved through this project. So these are still important food security crops. And then in terms of business expansion, they do provide opportunities for expansion of business. We can see turnover is improving. And if we also look at the trajectory of these investments that have been made, we said just under 10,000 farmers have now been reached through the 26 partnerships. By 2023, this will expand to 53,000 farmers, when the full impact of these partnerships has been realized. Secondly, the project adopted a hybrid design approach. So we said at the beginning there were two components. There was a market systems component, there was and the pre-market or farmer uplift component. And this we feel is really appropriate, especially in emerging or thin markets. And by emerging and thin markets, potato is very much an emerging or thin market in terms of private sector development. So this means that sometimes more support is going to be required on behalf of the project. But we feel this pragmatic and adaptive approach to program design needs to be adopted from the beginning, especially if you're working in thin markets. Access to credit really is critical to the commercialization of agriculture, particularly for rice farmers. Now we can see that rice farmers were accessing loans of up to 350 euros to cover their main cost of production, which were hire of land and also purchase of agricultural inputs. However, for potato farmers, most of them are able to use savings to cover their main cost of production, which is seed potato. So there is a sort of a difference between rice and potato farmers. And at the same time, potato farmers can get seed on credit from some of the integrated seed businesses and LSPs. So we can see that this access to credit really is critical for both rice and potato, but rice, it's really essential. The project upgraded and constructed 67 kilometers of road. This really has a catalytic effect in key strategic locations in terms of access to input and output markets, and of course other social amenities such as health facilities. But it's also sustainable. The approach taken by the project was to go into partnership with the district local governments in terms of the implementation of these roads projects. The district local governments put in some of their own resources and some equipment, and this has really induced ownership in the process. And these impacts have been sustained now 2 to 3 years after completion of these roads projects. We can see that the practice of crop diversification is very important. It resulted in farmers being more resilient than their non-trained counterparts. And this could be further, the resilience aspect of this could be further enhanced by introducing a farming systems approach, which looks not only at the potato or rice. In this project, we looked at the support crops. These were soybean and bush beans in the rice sector, cabbage, onions, and climbing beans in the potato sector. But there are other crops within that farming system. There's also livestock within that farming system. So that more holistic approach would enhance resilience in the future. And also restrictions in COVID-19 did present challenges for the project. We talked about the difficulties in movement and meeting groups, which restricted one of the training components, but it also restricted partners in terms of their ability to finance some of these co-investments. Some of the financing was delayed due to economic downturn, and this did lead to delay in some of the implementation of the activities with some of the partners. Despite this, farmers and firms have shown resilience during this setback. What are the key lessons learned in potato? We can see that potato needs an established local seed potato industry to live up to its potential. As we said at the beginning of this project, the baseline figure in terms of national demand, 1.5% of national demand for seed potato has been met. Through the efforts of the integrated seed businesses that's been supported under this project, this is now increased to 9% and will increase to 22% by 2022. However, there's still a huge gap of 78%. So a more focused and an integrated approach is really needed to bridge this gap. By this, we mean more focused in terms of the efforts of different players, be it narrow public sector, the private sector, and also donors, as more donors are getting interested in this area. But it also needs more bigger private sector players to come in to bridge this significant gap. The screenhouse model promoted under the project, which my colleague Roger's talked about with KFRC, has proven a really successful medium-term business opportunity. By medium term, we mean the profitability is not realized in these investments till 3 years. And because it takes 3 years, it's very difficult to attract finance from financial institutions. And also to achieve scale is very difficult. In terms of the land availability, one greenhouse needs 25 acres of land to do the full multiplication cycles. So it's a significant investment. So expansion is also quite difficult. So we need to still support new entrants coming into this market using this model. And to do this, we recommend a subsidy approach. On average, the project put in 70% and the business put in 30% during the REACH project. We would recommend that on an investment of 15,000. And as Frank was saying, the investment is in a screenhouse and a diffuse light store. This is needed to attract more commercial farmers into this sector. Thirdly, we've seen better access to quality seed will result in improved yields. 39%, there's a 39% improvement in yield between quality declared seed and home safe seed. So this is very important going forward. And we talked a bit about the Dutch sector, so the Dutch seed sector in Uganda. It is profitable for smallholder farmers, but it also is challenging. It's profitable because they can get higher yields. If we look at an average yield with local seed of about 4 metric tons, the average yields of farmers using the Dutch seed was 7 to 8 metric tons. So it is much higher. It fetches an improved selling price, but also it's still a niche market. As I said, it's only 10%. It is also challenging because of the longer dormancy period which can be up to 4 months with some of these varieties. In terms of how this is going to go forward, there are new varieties subject to release soon by the Varietal Release Committee of MIFE, and some of these have shorter dormancy periods. And what are the main lessons learned in rice? As we saw, and as we've seen, the uptake of multi-stage mills by farmers has really increased under this project. At the baseline, it was 20%, and it's now 63%. This is due to the attractive price point and, of course, the higher rates of recovery, which my colleague Rosette explained, and Mohammed from DGL also mentioned. At the same time, this is not enough to sustain farmers' interest. You also need embedded approaches. So Mohammed talked about the co-investment in a truck, which is able to source paddy directly from rice farmers, but also he's been using a village agent approach, which village agents act as buyers of rice, but they also provide frontline extension services as well. So these embedded approaches also need to be scaled up if it's going to continue to realize this continued benefit. And from what we've seen, so seed is entering the rice sector, and lowland rice could really benefit from a more vibrant seed sector, but demand's only emerging. This has only happened over the last 2 years. Other factors are really still critical to yield, and we look at the issue of water management, which is still probably the main factor in improving yields in rice, and that remains. And finally, a supportive business enabling environment is critical to long-term growth of the sector. At the moment, this is not in place. There are issues of importation of rice from outside Uganda, from neighboring countries. And this does have an effect of destabilizing some of the main actors here in the rice processing sector in Uganda. So over the next 5 years or so, this really needs to become a more supportive business environment if this realization of self-sustainability in the rice sector is gonna happen. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back to James, who I think is going to introduce the embassy.
Thank you so much, David, for that presentation. And now I would like to introduce Hans Rothschilder. And it looks like they may have just had a connection loss. We'll wait a moment as
I'm there.
they get. Thank you. And let me invite you to share your video.
Well, just for 1 second then, because our line is quite weak. So we were kicked out a few times, but just to show the people that it is really me, I will switch on the camera. Yeah, that's me. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be with you. And I will switch it off again because otherwise you will not hear me anymore. Good, thank you very much. Yeah, I have been asked by James and by David to say a few words on behalf of the Netherlands Embassy. As you are aware, the Netherlands Embassy is the financing partner of IFDC on the REACH project. We have been financing REACH because we believe that working on commercial aspects of the value chains is important. And we are doing so already since 2012, it can be 12, 13, but because we started with the Catalyst program and then it succeeded to the REACH. Well, this work on commercial aspects of the value chains, in our view, should lead to a better functioning of the value chains and profit not only consumers and commercial operators, but also the smallholders of Uganda, which form far largest part of the community. Well, development is a learning experience. We start with a project, and then during the implementation, we see where things go well and where things need amendments. So also in REACH, we do see results. David and his team have taken us through their results as they have found them. And at the same time, there are, of course, new challenges. And that is, the challenges are always the challenge. How do we go about that? How critical are we ourselves on our achievements? And how can we address the weaknesses in our approaches? From that perspective, from the embassy, we think that with REACH, we have gone a far way. And we see that this may be also a time to reflect on how we are going to proceed in the future. Let us put it clearly, the potato sector is not the Dutch sector, of course. There are many actors that needs to be involved to make it work. Talking about the government, talking about civil society, talking about farmer organizations, etc., etc. We believe that the support to commercial farmers may need rethinking, as large investments in a few individual farmers may not trickle the development in the chain as we hoped for. And it may also not always benefit the majority of the farmers in the chain as expected. Also in the presentation today, we heard that the focus of commercial companies, and that's completely understandable, is often on their development and less on bringing farmers up in the chain. The presented results are focused to a large extent on the technical aspects. Those are important for sure, but for lasting effects, we need to look at the socio-economic and the risk aspects as well. The introduction of innovations in the potato chain linked to local varieties are encouraging. However, as already explained also by David, there is still a way to go if we would like to see this being scaled up. The required investments, the lack of basic material is really an issue of great importance and might need to be, again, something that we need to reflect upon how we can bring that further. In this respect also, we perhaps, as the government will also react on after this, it would be good to know how the government sees its role to build on the successes and the challenges related to the seed production and the availability for smallholders. Seed remains a challenge, and we as the Netherlands Embassy, through our projects, cannot solve it alone. We need to partner up. The embassy strongly feels that the results of REACH are a good starting point and need further reflection and be put in the context of local producers, taking into account the whole farming systems, their risk management, and the opportunities and challenges that they bring with them or that they provide. The functioning of local markets could be strengthened. It's true that the Dutch varieties are of big interest for the processing industry. However, also local markets could form a good market for these products. And that could also create more demands and better prices, and put farmers in a better position for in the negotiations with the processing industries. Having said all that, as you may be aware, the embassy is reflecting on how to support the future development of the potato value chain from this broader perspective. So not just the chain, but what is the role of the potato in the farming system, and what can it bring, and what can it bring in relation to other components of the farming system. Then the developments of the chain, we believe, then the developments of the chain may have a lasting effect on the agricultural development of Uganda and the farming communities. I would like to leave it at this. Thank you for providing us with the opportunity, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for those comments, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'd like to now open up another question and answer as we've reflected on the impact of the project. And so now, if you have any more questions, I invite you to submit them via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we have a few questions in right now that I'll go ahead and address. So please continue to send those in. First one that is slightly addressed, but looking at the impact of the youth interventions, as we know, is a primary interest for the entire continent. What impact did the project have regarding youth and integrating them into the community and into the market and food systems in which they were interested?
Thanks, James. Thanks for the question. In terms of, if you look at the structure of the farmers that were reached under this project, youth was about 35%, so it's roughly 1/3. There are some specific youth-led strategies or interventions that were employed by the project. We've seen Mr. Frank today from KFRC. Frank is, as he said, he described it as it's a family business. But him and his brother are both qualify as youth in that business, and it's done with his mother and father. So that's an example of a youth-led opportunity. At the same time, my colleague Rogers talked about the spray service providers. So through this project, about 150 spray service providers have been trained. They provide the frontline spray service in terms of crop protection, but also agricultural advisory. And predominantly, those spray service providers are youth. It's attractive to youth because it's an income generating opportunity, and it can provide a quick income to a youth. So there were some very specific interventions under this project that did take youth into consideration.
Thank you so much, David, for that answer. Another question here. What is the continued plan for sustainability in the seed production sector, especially for producing clean seed, quality seed, and of course, the most important part, making sure that farmers can access and afford this seed?
So, I mean, what we'd like to see is consolidation of these investments that have been made as we said, the investment in this greenhouse, the impact is really realized in the third year. You're actually starting to make money in the third year. So we haven't yet felt there were 8 integrated seed businesses supported under this project. We haven't realized the full impact, and that will be felt in 2022, by which time 3,600 tons of seed will be in the system, but it's still only a quarter of what we need. So we do think there needs to be a lot more entrants, such as Kigezi Farmers Resource Center here, Frank. We need to attract more entrants into this business. It is an investment. It needs time, but it also needs a high degree of technical skill. Not everyone can produce plantlets. It's a very specialized and technical thing. So it does need that technical support as well. As I've mentioned before, there are two types of ways we would see this happening. The subsidy approach, which we'd mentioned, but also there are some potential entrants on a more commercial level that could come into this sector. Some of them already have screen houses. Some of them also have tissue culture facilities. So there is potential there for bringing in some of these bigger commercial actors to really supplement what's been done by the screen houses at the community level.
Thanks so much, David. Finally, I think the final question we have, so of course, if you have any more, we've got a little bit of time left for questions, so please submit them. Question we're looking at here, I think relates really to sustainability of acquiring modern farming techniques being local led, being Ugandan led. This participant is asking about, sponsoring graduates, to gain knowledge from other countries, which was outside the scope of this project. But in what ways can partners and others look at emphasizing on local-led acquisition of modern farming techniques and being able to educate the farmers that need to be using those?
Yeah, I think through this project, and we haven't really mentioned it, we did have an internship component. We worked with about 50 interns, and we placed them with various partners. So they got that work experience with the partners. Placements were either for a period of 3 or 6 months. And then we saw at least about 20% of those interns were actually employed by the partners. So as well as providing a skilling opportunity through working directly with some of the private sector actors, such as DGL, they could then benefit from having some employment by the end of it. So that was one strategy we employed to really skill up and provide opportunities in the employment sector. I don't know, Mohammed, do you want to say something about your experience?
No, you said it all.
Okay. So Mohammed is one example where he actually he had an intern and then he employed that intern after as an extension worker, and the same here with Frank and KFRC.
Great. Yes, I think that was a great opportunity for those young people to develop skills and develop on the ground expertise. Well, with that, that's the final. I'll wrap up the Q&A. And at this time, I would like to invite the Commissioner of Crop Protection from MAIF to join us and give the closing comments for this webinar. Mr. Paul Mambu, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think to enable me be clear, permit me to put off that I can be heard. My name is Paul Mambu. I am the Commissioner Crop Inspection and Certification in the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. The Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries has been a partner under this project. And right from the start, please, Agneta, kindly make this correction. The department ahead is not crop protection. It is Department of Crop Inspection and Certification. Now, this department that I'm privileged to head is a regulatory department for the crop subsector. Am I still being heard? Okay, it is a regulatory department for the crop subsector in the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. We specifically regulate crop inputs, but also the product coming out of the crop farming system. Of seed in the country, we regulate the quality of agricultural chemicals. These are pesticides and fertilizers. And we also regulate aspects of plant health, leading to inspection and certification of products that come on the market, both domestically and globally. So it is by virtue of our regulatory roles that we're able to be part of this project that is coming to a close, the IFDC REACH project. And we have worked very closely, specifically on the seed potato and rice seed value chains. And we have been able to make significant progress on these two value chains, as I'm shortly going to be able to explain. The key areas where we have worked closely on with the IFDC REACH project include the following: evaluation and introduction of Dutch potato varieties in Uganda. During the Catalyst project, through the REACH project, IFDC partnered with MAIF and NARO for evaluation of Dutch potato varieties through the National Variety Performance Trials, that it is, and also uniformity and stability tests. During the first phase, evaluation trials started in 2015 with 21 varieties for 3 seasons: 2015A, 2015B, 2016A cropping seasons. After which 9 varieties were approved, and these are the Marquis, Arizona, Sagita, Voyager, El Mundo, Connect, Sapomira, Taurus, and Panamera. These were approved and gazetted for commercial utilization. And the Panamera, the Taurus, and Marquis varieties are currently under multiplication. Further, in the second phase of evaluation, 17 varieties have been tested from 2018 up to 2020, specifically in the cropping seasons of 2018A, 2019A, and 2020A. and the varieties are soon to be released by the National Variety Release Committee of MAIF for commercial production. The other area where we've registered significant progress under the IFDC REACH project is in the registration of commercial seed producers, both in the rice and potato sectors. REACH-Uganda project has facilitated the registration of the first seed potato producers. And ladies and gentlemen, I think a round of applause for REACH-Uganda. And these namely Namakwa Land Farm, Clark Farm, Farm Inputs Care Limited, popularly known as FICA in Uganda here, and the Kaki International Limited Farm. That is for the seed potato. And in rice, Kivimba Limited registered as rice seed producers with MAIF. So here, the 4 farms now producing seed potato. These are the very first that we have licensed as a ministry with the support under the REACH project. And then also Kivimba Rice. This is a big rice growing company in Uganda. Now that it has been also licensed to produce rice seed, this is a very useful contribution to the country. Now the rice seed commercial producers will produce and distribute large quantities of quality rice seed to both smallholders and large-scale farmers. The seed potatoes of the released Dutch varieties, particularly Panamera, Taurus, and Makis, which are very popular and make production and productivity. And then the is in certification. In 2021, they started the commercial production of seed, and MAIF has conducted field inspections and certification of seed for distribution to farmers. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, is that evaluation of the Dutch varieties of the seed potato has supplemented the increase of potato germplasm in Uganda. More so, high-yielding varieties with processing qualities, hence promoting the emergence of potato processing industries such as Sam's for crisps and hotels and fast food restaurants for French fries such as Chicken Express. Thus enhanced import substitution of processed potato products for foreign exchange savings to Uganda. Now, any effort to saving foreign exchange by having substitution of products that we can produce in Uganda here is a very big contribution to the economy. And once again, thank the project for this achievement. Quality controls in the seed system has reduced seed-borne diseases and has substituted and accessibility of clean seed potato and rice to farmers at demand and supply. So ladies and gentlemen, those are achievements MAIF partnering with the IFDC REACH project. We really want to thank the very hardworking team that has been at IFDC REACH. And if there's an opportunity to tie up the remaining loose ends, we would be happy if we can have an extension to make sure that we tie up any loose ends that have been informed by the closeout study. I want to thank you, and at this juncture, I end for God and my country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Commissioner, for those comments, and thank you all for joining us today. If you missed any part of the presentation, it will be the video and the presentation will be made available for both attendees and those who were unable to attend. So again, from IFDC, we thank you for joining, and have a nice evening or afternoon or rest of your day, depending on where you are. Thank you so much.